This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV as we turn now to the U.S.'s role in the Israel-Gaza conflict and bring in Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Mr. Ambassador, we appreciate your joining us at what I know is a late hour in Tel Aviv. But President Biden is just now on his way home, and I'd like you to listen to part of the message that he delivered in Tel Aviv and get your reaction. Here he is.
The vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses innocent families in Gaza as human shields, putting their command centers, their weapons, their communications tunnels in residential areas.
Mr. Ambassador, President Biden also referred to some of the mistakes that were made by the U.S. in the wake of 9/11 as part of his message of restraint, while also allowing for Israel to seek justice. How did that message land in Tel Aviv?
Oh, I think people may have understood that, as I understood, that it was a reference not to get involved in sort of a quagmire in Gaza. If you're going to go in there and you're going to uproot Hamas, then get it done and get the hell out of there. And it had a particular resonance for me, Joe, I'd tell you the truth, because in 2003 I was called to testify in front of Congress about the impending Iraq war. I was merely an historian back then. And I testified that it would be a big mistake to get involved in state making in Iraq. I go in, kill Saddam Hussein and get out. But the British had lost their stomach for it, and the French had lost their stomach for it and have withdrawn. And I predicted that the United States would lose its stomach for it too, and also withdraw. And the Iranian border would move about 800 miles westward toward us. And I think, unfortunately, I was right by that. So I understood exactly what the president was saying. As for his first remark about the majority of Palestinians not being Hamas, drawing a distinction, I understand why he has to say that. Unfortunately, it's not entirely true. The Palestinians in Gaza overwhelmingly voted for Hamas, supported Hamas, celebrated when Hamas butchered our citizens. And in the Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas, he's in the 18th year of his 4-year term, and he won't stand for re-election because he knows that Hamas would overwhelmingly win there too. One of our big problems, maybe our biggest problems with the Palestinians, is that the majority of them support Hamas. And you can't ignore that fact. No, it's true. Not all of them are Hamas, but an awful lot of them are.
Okay, but Ambassador, is support for Hamas enough to justify the potential massive loss of life we could see for Palestinian civilians? How should that be balanced here?
What we're trying to do is get the Palestinian civilians to move out of the battleground. That is an attempt to actually save Palestinian lives. I understand it's not pleasant at all to be displaced and moved to a different area, but the alternative would be far worse. Hamas uses its population as a human shield. Hamas builds massive labyrinths of tunnels under cities, under schools. It has its headquarters under hospitals. That's where they have their arsenals in mosques as well. And the only way that Israel can defend itself from further horrendous massacres of this stripe that we experienced on October 7th and 8th is to go in there and uproot Hamas. And that's a fighting, I'm an old paratrooper. I know what it is to be in a killing zone. But these streets are a nightmare for any army. It's endless booby traps and mines, and beneath it, this warren of tunnels. And the only way to fight against it, the only way to uproot Hamas is to move that civilian population away. Otherwise, they will be caught in the crossfire, which is precisely what Hamas wants.
Well, there's a lot there to consider, Mr. Ambassador, but the president was supposed to be on his way to Jordan right now instead of heading back home to sleep in his own bed tonight. And I wonder your thoughts on this summit in Jordan, a summit of Arab nation leaders being canceled, and what that means for geopolitics in that region on the eve of what appears to be a ground invasion of Gaza.
Well, it's certainly unfortunate. And the summit would have been welcomed, I think, by all Israelis, and certainly by the leaders of Jordan, Egypt, and maybe the Palestinian Authority. But there's the Palestinian, there's the Arab street, there's public opinion, which also tends to be very favorable toward Hamas. Leaders aren't, but the people are. And when it was abundantly clear that it was not an Israeli airstrike that destroyed that hospital, at least the parking lot of the hospital, killing so many civilians, but an errant Palestinian Islamic Jihad missile that was fired at us and sort of crashed prematurely, the people in those streets are unwilling to believe that, and they were demonstrating and rioting and made such a summit untenable. That's unfortunate. I think that the United States is going to try to continue to maintain close relations with its allies, to maintain our relations, these relations with the Abraham Accord signatory countries, that's the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco, and to try to, once the smoke clears of this crisis, to go back and try to affect a rapprochement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which would be a real game changer for the entire region. Who said it's going to be easy? This is the Middle East, folks. It ain't easy.
Yeah. Well, and on that subject, there is another country in the Middle East to ask you about. That would be Iran. This is actually a subject that was broached by Jack Lew, President Biden's nominee to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel. He had his confirmation hearing in the Senate today, and this is what he said about the threat of Iran, if you could take a listen.
I want to be clear. Iran is a threat to regional stability and to Israel's existence. If confirmed, I will uphold President Biden's commitment to deny Iran a nuclear weapon and warning to the region that anyone who's thinking of taking advantage of the current crisis, don't.
Mr. Ambassador, what is your read on how great the risk is that this crisis is taken advantage of, that this expands beyond just Israel and Hamas?
I don't think it's a matter of expansion. I think Iran was largely behind it. Iran saw weakness in Israel, that Israel was divided internally over political debates. It saw the United States that was unwilling to project power, withdrawing from the world, certainly withdrawing from the Middle East. It was afraid of that Saudi-Israel peace. Not only would the Iranians be facing a joint Saudi-Israeli strategic front, I think that the Iranians were very much afraid of Saudi nuclearization. The question of whether Saudi Arabia would get nuclear power as a result of that peace agreement was also very, very frightening to the Iranians. They want to be the only ones that have nuclear power in that area of the Persian Gulf. And so it didn't take very much to encourage Hamas to launch this strike and to provide the funding and the training and the know-how and the intelligence for it. We believe that. Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
Are we good with that narrative, Mr. Ambassador? Because we hear this from a lot of folks on the program that, hey, look, they've historically backed Hamas. You don't have to be a genius to know that. But is it not incumbent upon Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden to show evidence of that connection?
Maybe they don't want to. Maybe it's from court sources that they don't want to reveal. But I'll give you some evidence. We know that Hamas senior officials met with Iranian senior officials about several weeks before that operation, before the attack. We know that every missile that's fired at us, and by the way, I had about 3 or 4 fired just outside my window not long ago, they are either engineered by Iran or actually manufactured by Iran. I don't know how much more evidence you need.
Well, of course, the administration maintains that there was no direct evidence that Iran had direct knowledge of this particular attack. And Mr. Ambassador, we at Bloomberg would like to share with you, we hope you remain safe as you are witnessing that scene there in Tel Aviv. On the subject of the Biden administration, though, of course, they're not just dealing with the question of Iran. They are also dealing with the question of providing funding and aid to Israel. Our understanding here at Bloomberg is that the president could be asking Congress for in total $100 billion for aid, not just to Israel, but Ukraine as well. What does Israel need most right now? What should the U.S. be giving?
The United States can provide essential forms of ammunition and capabilities for Israel. If we have to fight on one front or perhaps even 2 fronts in the south and in the north, we will need resupply of ammunition. Now, the United States has pre-supplied, pre-positioned about $2 billion worth of military equipment and ammunition beneath the state of Israel. That ammunition was put there by George Bush at the beginning of the century to serve American armed forces in this region. They're, for the most part, not here anymore, but we have the ability to ask for the keys, literally for the keys to those warehouses when we need them, and to go in and take what we need. We write it down. We pay it back later. So what we need are certain types of ammunition. We need certain capabilities, certainly in the intelligence field. And we need what I call the diplomatic iron dome, which is America's readiness to cast vetoes in the Security Council, as they did today, as the Russians, the Chinese will move to try to condemn us.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us so late in the evening, or I guess early morning from Tel Aviv. We really appreciate your time. And again, stay safe. That is former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren.